Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 10th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. I apologize that we are starting a few minutes late tonight. We don't have a lot on the agenda tonight, but it's probably going to take some time. So we'll do our best to move things along at a good pace for everybody. I will start by calling the roll, right? Mr. Bush?
Present.
Adrian?
Here.
TJ?
Present.
Ginny? Present. Colin? Present. 5 present, so all in attendance. Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes from the February 10th, 2025 meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any comment from the board on the minutes? Any public comment on the minutes? Perfect. Nice and non-contentious. All right. Let me call the vote. The motion is to approve the minutes from the February 10th, 2025 meeting. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous, and we can move on to item number 3, the HOWIE lot line change. Do we have the applicants in the room this time, or are we remote again? Remote, okay. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Just if you would, for the record, each state your names.
Yes, hi, good evening. This is Kenneth Howie, and I'm joined by my neighbor, Michelle Williams. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you. Can you hear us?
Yes, gotcha.
Okay. Welcome back. So we have in front of us, Jim, do you want to give us a quick rundown on what's changed about the proposal this week?
The applicant has resubmitted plans to address many of the comments from the Remington-Vernick review letter. And I understand from the applicant, I know the shed was one of the issues, being too close to the property line. And I believe they've indicated that they will remove that shed. So now we're down to like a finite number of items.
Perfect.
One I know is the need for a wetlands delineation. They're not conducting any work right now. I know in my discussions with them, I suggested that maybe, bless you. Bless you.
Thank you.
A partial waiver to defer the need for a wetlands delineation until any work is proposed on the property. That way they don't need to get it right now. And the other issue was the issue with the right-of-way dedication, which I believe they're still requesting the waiver from, since the surrounding properties do not have the right-of-way dedicated. The township has no plans to widen the road in that area.
So just 2 points of clarification, and we'll take the right-of-way dedication first. Is it appropriate to call it a waiver if they're not obligated under the law to dedicate that land?
I would say to the extent that it was in the review letter and was requested, yes, it would be a waiver.
Okay. Very well. And then on the matter of the wetland delineation. So regarding the wetland delineation, at a later time, if they were to do work, if we didn't follow your recommendation today, would they be required to do that wetland delineation at a later time, or is that dependent on the work that gets done?
Typically, our wetlands are, they're tiered based on what the ground conditions are surrounding the wetlands. In this case, there's the ponds and like a little ditch wetland area in between them. The buffer from that would be 100 feet. So if they weren't within 100 feet, we wouldn't require anything from them for that. So
what's the value of even deferring it? If later action requires it, it would require it, or it wouldn't require it if it didn't. Am I misunderstanding that?
I know actually what you're saying makes sense. If you feel it's appropriate, you can just grant a waiver from that. However, like I said, in the future, if they do something anywhere near those ponds, they will be required to delineate the wetlands. So it's, take your pick.
Can that be put on their deed or anything, so that the next owner, oh, sorry. Can that be put on the deed, a deed restriction, so that if the next owner comes in and wants to put something closer than 100 feet, they're aware of it, or?
You can certainly do that. It's my practice. I like to keep deeds cleaner than not. To me, this isn't really appropriate to, doesn't necessarily have to be on the deed.
Okay.
It can be on the notes. And my belief is that putting something like this on the deed, you don't know what's going to change a year from now, 2 years from now, or 3 years from now. And those requirements that we're putting into a deed could change. And I'd hate to gut into that argument as to what's recorded via deed and what the new rules, regs, ordinances of the township are. I believe that if they want to do something in the future, they would have to come back before you, and they would have to abide by the current ordinance at the, at the
Yeah,
time that they make the request.
My concern with deferring is simply if they come back in the future to change something about the property that would not otherwise trigger a wetland delineation, it has been deferred, so they still come before us for a planning action. They have to address it at that time, one way or another, even though it's not required. Does that make sense? We're just burdening them to request a waiver they wouldn't have to request a waiver for.
I'm following you, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Does anyone have any feelings one way or the other?
I guess, maybe I'm not following 100%, but it just seems like the waiver's asking for something that they're already going to have to do anyway, if it's required.
They don't have to do it now.
They don't have to
Do
do it
not
now.
have to do it right now, no, because the action that they're taking does not require them to do this.
Okay, and in the future, if they get whatever our code says, sounds like within 100 feet of this area, they're going to have to do that anyway.
And the code in the future could say 50 feet from, or 150 feet from.
Okay.
So for clarity, there's no waiver needed now.
Well, actually, it would be a waiver needed. I think what Colin's suggesting is just granting the waiver from that requirement. Since in the future, if they did something, it would be triggered automatically by our ordinances, or if they tried to subdivide by the subdivision land development ordinance.
In the review letter,
A waiver so the waiver is so that they don't have to do it now.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
But I guess what if the properties don't change and somebody just adds a pool house or does something that's within that? Are they still required to do that same thing, or can they bypass that?
No, that's something that we do check on.
Okay. I mean, as long as there's no loopholes.
yeah. So we've requested this in this review letter.
It is an ordinance requirement, and that's why
Okay,
it
so
was
it's an ordinance
cited by
requirement for the subdivision.
Remington Vernick, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's no real impact because there's no structures being built. So we're just saying there's a request to waive the requirement from this application, not for all eternity. Right. Okay. So if we were to waive that requirement now or defer the requirement, and we waive the, we agreed to waive the request for the dedication of the right-of-way, this is done free and clear. Is that correct? There's no other items?
Not as long as the shed is taken out.
Yeah.
That's contingent, right?
Well, my only notes were that also the easement in the front yard, I guess, has that been resolved?
That's the right-of-way, that was the
The right of way,
whole
okay.
about the right-of-way,
Okay,
yes.
so-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think any of the other items that may have not been fully addressed, were there any? If there were, I think the applicant had said they will comply. So if there's a minor little thing that Remington Vernick found, they'll fix that up before they
Okay.
record the plans.
So, and we don't have to mention the shed because they're saying it's going to be taken out before this change takes place.
Correct. They'll have to revise their plan just to say "to be removed," so it's clear that that is a structure to be removed.
But before that line's changed, it will be taken out.
No, it will not. It will be taken out it will fall down before it's taken out.
That- that's
Right, I
not
mean,
what-
we've grandfathered the shed, correct? With all due, I mean, it's submitted, and I'm sorry, I got kicked out, but we made an agreement that the shed would, be taken out, or it's grandfathered currently, but if the ownership changes, it'll be removed prior to the new owner.
Yeah. So it is to be removed.
It will be
Yeah.
Yeah.
removed.
Okay, and that's an agreement that has been made between the applicant and the township?
I believe they're saying that right now, that they will remove it.
Yeah.
How do we enforce that? In 10, 20 years, that gets sold again, how does the township remember that?
Well, it's going to be removed soon because Michelle Williams is trying to sell her home. So hopefully, I think she wants to sell it pretty quickly.
It'll probably fall down before it's removed
You
between.
you understand my question, right?
Yeah, and that could just be handled by a note in the plans that we will look into to make sure it gets properly addressed.
Just a quick question. So if it does fall down, does that meet the requirement, or do they have to actually remove the actual pieces of the shed?
Well, then you get into
Just thinking.
then you get into property maintenance and they need to clean it up, so, but that
As long
would
as the
address
shed
that.
is gone, it doesn't matter if it's been removed, as long as it's not standing.
Right.
I guess I'm going to say this. I'm still thinking and deciding and listening, but that doesn't make me 100% comfortable.
And it's not where we left the matter last month, right? It was, we were respectfully, we were very clear, right? That we were not going to grandfather the structure. We didn't want to trust the next buyer or the end of a process to make sure, right? You know, I could maybe see my way through to an agreement to have the shed removed within 90 days or prior to the close of a sale of the property, because at least at that point, there's a firm timeline on it. But I'm not comfortable if the property comes off the market and it sits there, the ordinance is the ordinance, and we don't see a compelling reason for a waiver from the ordinance at this time.
I agree. My notes here say okay for shed to be gone at sale, so yeah, I think that's what we agreed upon about the shed actually being gone physically.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, how about something like the later of 90 days or the sale of the property?
Sure.
Yeah, my notes indicate that it wasn't a natural demolition of the shed. It was a shed to be removed in a reasonable amount of time. We noted there was an 80-year-old shed, but we also stated that shed was to be removed in a reasonable amount of time. And I think we bannered about the idea of 90 days or something like that.
Yeah, and I kind of like the way Tony phrased it, the later of 90 days or the sale of the property, that's clear.
Later over this.
Or the earlier.
Later, no, later's a problem because it can put the obligation on the new owner.
Yeah.
So it'd have to be the earlier.
If it sells within 90 days, right? But
The house
otherwise,
isn't even on the market, and this is inhibiting me by putting my house back on the market. The shed is being used currently to store gardening stuff without disclosing things. It will come down. It will be caveated in a potential sale of the property, whoever wants to buy my property, that it is removed. That's what we all agreed on, and that's what I'm confirming verbally with everybody.
I mean, this feels like a strange impasse to be at.
Based on what the applicant just did, you would go with Tony's suggestion, the later of.
the later of 90 days or sale,
So-
right? And the only exception to that is if it sells within 90 days, but again, I feel like we could just go with, upon or before sale of the property, right? And just that mitigates any time frame issue there if it sells sooner than that.
If it doesn't.
Look, I agree this is a strange impasse, and it was very well put. But we left here last month with one of two things to do: either move the property line or take the shed out. And if you can't take the shed out, move the property line around the shed so it goes 10 feet around the shed.
The shed will come out. How's that?
Yeah.
But before this is done? Because you understand what I'm asking? I don't think I'm being crazy
The
here.
applicant's just agreed to it, so.
Okay, all right,
So
gotcha.
That's, we don't need to
Okay.
belabor it, but I think we'll give them a hard deadline and that's it.
Okay.
Yep. Do you feel that 90 days is a reasonable amount of time? Do you feel like you need 120? I mean, we're open to, we just want something that's going to work for everyone.
I think I mean, I can talk to Ken. That shed's been there since we bought the house. So, it really doesn't, it's not going to be in interest of a potential home buyer, but it's utilitarian. You want 90 days? How about let's make it Labor Day to be safe? Let me get through the summer.
So 120 days would be the request, I think.
20 days is Labor Day.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, just before we make a motion, just to be clear on what we're talking about here, I think our view is we just want to know that it will be removed, even if you choose not to sell the property, if the sale takes 37 years, whatever the case may be. So we're talking about 120 days or prior to the close of the sale of the property, whichever is the sooner.
20 days or prior, whichever is the sooner. Yes.
I just don't want the obligation to pass to the next property owner, and then we start off with a conversation with them saying, well, it wasn't conveyed, and all these other things.
It will not, and there will not be any cargoes, things, or anything that looks disparaging on the back of the property.
I get, just to be safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Does anybody want to piece a motion together from all that?
I just have a question, if I could, before.
Sure, of course.
A lot of times, I know this happened in my case, but when you go to sell a property and the prospective buyer comes in, they kind of look around and say, gee, I kind of like how that looks. Will you leave it there for me? So does this handle that situation?
Yeah, they can't close on this. The agreement is they won't close on the sale of the property while the shed is standing.
Okay.
That's
Trust me, it's not going to be a deal breaker, Ginny, on
Yeah.
the shed.
yeah. I'm sure it's a lovely shed.
It's an old shed. It's probably from Sears,
Okay.
They just don't want you to leave town, Michelle.
I'm ready to leave town, you guys. Give me grief on my shed. All the parking stuff.
We want you to stay here. All right.
25 years. 25 years.
So we would be making a motion to grant the waiver of the request to do the wetlands, was it a boundary survey?
Delineation.
Jurisdictional delineation.
Yeah, and then also there's a waiver to show the sewage and water facilities on the plan. I believe that's a requirement that was noted.
Sorry, if you don't mind if I just chime in really quick.
Please.
So they had sent a letter. It's from Kenneth Howie. They sent it today, a couple hours ago, about the waivers that they're going to be requesting. And they have 2 additional waivers on there. The first, and they're both for the same section. It's section 178-28EE. And they say we request a waiver from providing a note regarding the existing water and sewer services for the proposed lot line change. Both properties currently have well, water, and septic systems, which have been noted on the plans. And they also are requesting a waiver from that same section for providing statements on the plans from the county health department or other agencies regarding the sufficiency and acceptability of water supply and sanitary sewers, as well as from the Bucks County Conservation District regarding soil erosion and sediment control. So that section of the ordinance, the requirement itself, is and it's in the section for preliminary plans. It's statements from the county health department or other agency with jurisdiction as to the sufficiency and acceptability of the proposed means of water supply and sanitary sewers from the Bucks County Conservation District as to soil erosion and sedimentation control to be provided. So I think they're requesting a waiver from referencing that on their plans. We had said since they already have water and sewer and they're not doing disturbance, just to note that on their plans, and maybe instead of having these statements, and it seems like, I think they're requesting a waiver from doing like any of that, I think is my understanding of
Do
it.
we have a copy of this review letter or this response?
Let me see. It was sent to our office, and then Jim has a copy. Jim, Dan McClune, Dave, and then Maureen, I think you also received a copy. It was sent at 6:43 is the time I have on here.
Yeah, can we
Yeah.
put that in, can we put that in the SharePoint?
We should be required to notify the town when it comes down.
Sorry, and Melanie, just to clarify, you know, as the author of that letter, the intent was to take the language that had been provided in the first review from your firm, and that they had called out that point as a suggested or requested waiver in the initial review letter. So we were basically just parroting that point from the original review. The intent is not to change the nature of that request. It was to keep it as it was originally stated in the first review letter by Remington Barrett.
Sorry, I just want to see the actual response before we make a motion on anything.
I could print it out and I'll be back in. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Okay, so point 4, that was already in the prior response, so that's the waiver for the dedication. Point 21, provide a note regarding the existing water and sewer services for proposed wetland change. So all we're looking is for them to write on the plan that they are serviced by septic and well?
I think that's what they're suggesting, to just add on there, rather than getting something in writing from the county health department that the septic is fine and the well is
Yeah,
fine. I mean,
I-
they've been living there for 25 years.
And nothing that they're doing impacts
Correct.
the well or the
And there's no
septic.
soil erosion because there's no work contemplated, therefore there's no.
Oh, okay, so
conservation
it already
district.
has been noted on the plan, so that's fine.
Yeah.
So then we have section 3.1, no variances. Verifications county health, okay. All right. Yep.
I'm going back to the shed for one last pass.
Back to the shed.
No, it's like, so I understand, and I think I understand where we are. The one thing I think we have, I'm not clear on is, what's the red light?
That means that your mic's not on, Adrian?
Oh, sorry, thank you. How do we, like, actually police this? That's the wrong word, but how do we, how do we systematically know that this is gonna happen before it passes some milestone, and we find out it didn't happen? And I know I'm not.
Jim puts a note on the Outlook
So it
calendar
ha-
of code enforcement to drive over there in 120 days and see if there's a shed in the back of the
Well,
property.
what happens if it's already sold and it's still there?
Trust me,
Well, that's-
house is not listed, so this.
That's the sooner of point, right?
Yeah.
No, look,
The
this is
sooner
not,
of
this
point-
is not on you, this is not on you guys, but we're creating,
Yeah.
a waiver, a sort of variation from what our process is supposed to be.
Yeah, but if I may, Adrian, this is typical for almost every land development. They have notes on there saying to be removed.
Okay.
To be relocated, and we just make sure that that gets done
All right.
prior to a certain trigger point.
All right, so I'm making too much of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a good question, but I understand where you're
Yeah,
coming from.
yeah, I just, all I want to do is make sure we're not creating some precedent down there where a potential bad actor could come in and do something that would be not beneficial for the township. That's why they were all here. Well, this stuff's all here for in the first place, right?
So it'll be notes on the plan. A potential purchaser most likely won't look at the plans.
Yes.
They should. It's incumbent upon them. And if it is, again, our code enforcement officer, anybody will quote-unquote police this, will go to the property to make sure it is removed. If it's not removed before sale, it will be incumbent upon the new purchaser, even though it really isn't it's buyer beware. They should have done their homework to see what was recorded against the property.
Okay.
And it should come up in their title report
Yeah, but-
as something recorded against the property.
Okay, all right.
I mean, Adrian, I think that's a great point because, you know, I'm in the commercial lending field, so I know like we have conditions of closing. So this should be also a condition of the waiver that they complete this before. We should have somebody, if it's the code enforcement officer, whatever it is, they should be out there and I think they should make sure that this is done within 90 days, 100 days, whatever we have. I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea. I think someone should be out there and do that.
Yeah,
That should be part of the motion, I think, yeah. That's great. That's a great point.
and maybe if they take it down and sell it, I'm assuming you'll notify the township?
There's a move-in permit that the new buyer has to file to move into the township. So at that point, that would trigger a filing
Okay.
with the office.
All right.
Thank you. I was just
Done.
going to say that.
Sorry, Mr. Majewski.
We appreciate your rigor.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so I'm going to float a motion here, and then we can open any further comment. So the motion would be to approve the application for the lot line change and granting the waivers requested by Mr. Howie in his letter of March 10th, 2025, subject to the provision that the shed, which is non-conforming, be removed from the Williams property in 120 days or prior to the close of a sale of that property, whichever date is the sooner, and that the township's code enforcement officer shall inspect the property for compliance with that provision. Good?
I'll second.
Perfect. That being said, any comment from the commission? If any of you says shed, I'm going home.
Any public comment?
Is there any public comment? Okay, thank you very much. That being said, I will call the question for approval of the motion. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Vote is unanimous. Thank you very much for your patience with this process.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
everyone.
The
Really
shed will
appreciate
not be
that.
a deal breaker on it.
Thank you
Have a
so
great
much.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, before we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the TORBERT Farm subdivision, Ginny would like to make a comment.
My name is Jenny Torbert, and coincidentally, we're looking at the Torbert Farm proposed development next. I did recuse myself from the Wright Farm because there is some property there that still belongs to the estate of my husband. However, I am not recusing myself from the Torbert Farm because it was sold a year and a half ago without conditions. I have no continuing financial interest in it, no matter what happens to it. No development, all development, half development. So I feel I can be objective, and that is my reasoning.
Thank you, Ginny. Any comment from the commission? Great. That being said, would the applicants please come on up, make sure you turn on the mics, introduce yourselves.
And remember to have the mic close.
This is on, correct? Yes.
We can hear you.
Perfect. Good evening. My name is Mike McGinnis. I'm with Begley Carlin, and I am here on behalf of TORBERT Farm LP to discuss the development of the TORBERT Farm. To my left is Justin Giannotti from Dynamic Engineering. The subject property is located at 1700 Newtown Yardley Road, and it is zoned in the R1 district. It is a little over 108 acres. We are here to discuss our proposal to construct 78 single-family detached dwellings on the subject parcel. We came here, my predecessor representing the applicant, along with Mr. Giannotti, I think probably about a year and a half ago, with a substantially similar plan, but one that's a bit different for reasons that we'll discuss tonight. We're going to suggest to do things a bit differently. We are obviously before you for land development consideration, but considering the length of time which has lapsed in this matter, and the review letter from Remington Vernick and SAFE and the other consultants in the township, we thought that perhaps the better path this evening was to almost approach this sort of like a sketch plan conversation tonight, to come in, provide an update, walk through the plan, discuss some big picture components. We have some items that we would welcome your feedback on, and take your comments, answer any questions or concerns that you have, that the township consultants have, and then take those comments, and Justin's office will resubmit to the township. We'll get a new letter from Remington Vernick and the township consultants, and then we'll be back before you at a subsequent meeting asking for action. And we thought that was more prudent given the length of time. I'll also make the offer as well, considering the time period that we're looking at, that if any members of the Planning Commission would like to visit the site and to have a walkthrough, we would also certainly be amenable to do that and would be happy to facilitate such a meeting subsequent to the Planning Commission conversation this evening. I want to just, again, cover a couple things with this project. First, the reason for the delay, I think, between our initial submission and some of the conversations which have occurred with the township. The primary, and I don't have a pointer, but yeah, Justin, perhaps we can do a two-hander here. Van White, please. The primary reason for the delay, but not the exclusive reason, has to do with what was envisioned as a potential realignment of Creamery Road. So, as you're aware, as I indicated, the site is at the intersection, essentially, of 332 and Creamery. And if you look at the site the way it's currently oriented, we have two main points of ingress and egress. We have one into the site from Creamery, perfect, and we have another from Palomino Way as well at the top as the third point. So two from Creamery, and then we have one on Palomino. Internal to the site, as you can see, we have four roads. We have marked Road A, E, D, and C, I believe, which essentially parallel Creamery Road. There was, back in the 80s or 90s, on the township official map, there was a jog in Creamery Road that was depicted, but obviously never constructed. Conversation precipitated over the last, I'd say, 15 to 18 months regarding attempting to bring to fruition the reorientation of Creamery in such a way that would allow it to connect basically with Mirror Lake, yes, in the area that Justin is pointing out. And Justin's team and the township and PennDOT undertook, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 months of conversation to see if that would be doable. The end result of that, for a variety of reasons, was to arrive back at the point that was essentially depicted and submitted with the initial iteration of the application. In fact, Mr. Majewski's office, I think, authored a letter on June 14th indicating that this was the direction that the township had provided us. Specifically, said the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors has reviewed the feasibility of the potential realignment of Creamery Road and Mirror Lake Road as contemplated on the township's official map. Based on this review, they have decided not to further pursue the realignment of the intersections.
Mr. McGinnis, if I may, the Board of Supervisors never voted on it, and that is not the direction from the board. Just want to let you know we can discuss that more, but I want to make sure you realize that that's not the direction of the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, understood. But this correspondence and that dialogue led us to the plan that, again, is before you. I do want to indicate that despite the fact that we're making a statement that we're essentially at the point where Creamery would be mostly undisturbed, that is not the extent of the application. Justin's going to detail in a second that we do have improvements that are depicted at the intersection with this plan between Creamery and Mirror Lake. Those are improvements that have been discussed and vetted by the dynamic team, have been discussed with the township, and dialogue is ongoing with PennDOT. So again, even though this version of the plan shows Creamery remaining as the access point without the reorientation, there are site improvements, which I guess, Justin, might as well now jump
Good
into
opportunity
it.
right now, and Jim, thank you. So as after the Creamery Road, to our understanding, was foregone, and we went back with the Creamery Road and the existing layout, we worked with PennDOT, and we've been through about 4 cycles of PennDOT review, about 2 cycles of them reviewing our traffic impact study, and they're currently reviewing what's known as our site improvements for off-site improvements right now. And what was discussed and what came out of the township meetings is that there was going to be essentially turn lanes added. So as you come down south on Creamery Road, they're going to be adding a right turn lane and modifications to the signal to allow a dedicated right turn. So you'll see there it's about 190 foot of a turn lane, and then the single lane that makes a left onto the bypass. At that point, it's Yardley-Newtown Road. That was a big part because of the queuing that everyone's aware of that happens in the morning. That additional turn lane gives enough capacity for that morning and peak hour queue to queue up without backing up down Creamery Road, and increases the level of service of the signal. As you look down along the bypass, there's also, if you're aware now, as you travel, the original intent was to align Mirror Lake Road so that this intersection would almost be eliminated and that there would be a 4-point intersection coming in at Mirror Lake Road. To improve Mirror Lake Road based on what we're working with now, working with PennDOT, there's going to be dedicated turn lanes added. So as you travel westbound along the bypass, there's going to be a dedicated left turn onto Mirror Lake Road, which isn't there today. It's a single lane. You stop at the light if someone's trying to make a left, that backs up until that person can make the left. So we are able to make that movement within the existing roadbed of the bypass. But in order for the geometry to work on the other side of the road, there's going to be some widening that occurs on the south side of Mirror Lake Road to allow that, basically a shift of that existing turn lane to allow the geometry to flow right through. So this, again, was all vetted out through multiple iterations of review, comment, design with PennDOT, and we are on about our 3rd or 4th cycle of review with them, expecting comments back this week.
You can go back to the Palomino part 2. We're going to pivot into that as a topic of conversation. Perfect. One of the items, obviously, that you see here that we would like to discuss this evening is, as I indicated, we have points of access off of Creamery. We also, to the plan north, have a point of ingress and egress in Palomino Way. That is not a design that our team is married to. We think that it makes sense, but we're not insistent upon it. So one of the topics of conversation, and I don't know if the Planning Commission would prefer for us to complete sort of our summary at the beginning and then open it up, but just to highlight it, we're fine with the idea of basically closing off Palomino if that's something that would be beneficial to the community on Clydesdale Circle, and then either put up bollards or a gate of some sort of chained entrance point so that EMS vehicles obviously can access if needed. But if that was a preferred direction from the township to limit that as a main point of ingress and egress for vehicular traffic, that is certainly something that we would be willing and interested in entertaining. Again, we're comfortable to design it and build it the way it's depicted, but there is flexibility, and we would like your comments. Another point that we had highlighted is through some consultation with the township, we had modified the cartway width, which ordinarily in your ordinance has a 36-foot notation to 30 feet. And we've also modified the right-of-way from 56 to 50 feet. The intent on our end was, to the greatest extent possible, to limit the impervious surface. We're very proud of the fact that this plan has a lot of greenery on it, a lot of green space. And we thought that the plan, and I think some of the dialogue with the township consultants agreed, would be better with the 30-foot and the 50-foot distinction. But again, if that's something that the township, the planning commission, the supervisors, the consultants had thoughts on, we would be willing to certainly entertain that and have a conversation about that as well. I also would like to point out, back to the area that Justin was highlighting originally, back to the interplay basically between Creamery and Mirror Lake. Justin, if you wouldn't mind pointing out the connection that we have worked into the plan with the walking trail as well. That shows a plan revision and something we wanted to highlight and get your thoughts on.
Sure. So right now, the walking trail pretty much ends along our property frontage here. So as part of the improvement project, with the widening that's going to occur along Creamery Road, that walking trail, the 8-foot wide walking trail, is going to extend all the way down to the intersection of the bypass, Yardley-Newtown Road, and actually cross the bypass at that intersection. So that all is going to be upgraded with part of the signalized, thank you, Jim. Signalized upgrades here will allow that pedestrian crossing. There's already an existing asphalt walk which runs down and continues down Mirror Lake Road. Now, as part of your ordinance requirement, there's a requirement that you install sidewalks along all property frontages. Obviously, if you were to look at the aerial, there's really no benefit to installing a walking trail or any sort of pedestrian path along the frontage of the bypass because it goes right to the 95, and that's not a place where you want to send pedestrians. So through consultation with township staff, we understand that we're going to be requesting the waiver just out of feasibility and practicality. And then there's going to be an extension or a fee in lieu of that's going to be a contribution to extend the walking trail that now pretty much ends off the page here down Mirror Lake Road to allow that connectivity between, I'll call it, two dead ends of the path.
We want to encourage connectivity. We just want to encourage connectivity in an area where it makes sense and we're not endangering individuals who are residing in the community. So that's what we've arrived at, but again, we're happy to take your commentary and feedback as to that aspect of the plan as well. One other item to note, and it is commented on in the Remington and Vernick review letter, is we do have our MPDS permit, which is a bit atypical at this stage of a development, but that is in hand already, which again illustrates the work that the dynamic team has put in to get to this point, even before receiving what will hopefully be, at the end of the day, a recommended approval from the Planning Commission and moving to the Board of Supervisors. What I'd like to do at this point is, Justin, I know we've just touched on it, I keep having you get up and sit down and get up and sit down, sorry, but if you don't mind just walking through big picture on your end about the site design generally, and then we have a number of waivers, we have a number of comments in the Remington Vernick letter. Happy to address any or all of those, or just big picture, take feedback from the Planning Commission and have an open forum conversation, whatever your preference is.
Mike, before you progress.
Sure.
Maybe we could just talk about the traffic flow and what you just break that down a little bit.
Absolutely.
First, I want to say I appreciate the fact that you came in here tonight and said you want to have a conversation and get feedback and are not looking for preliminary final approval, as was on our agenda, I believe. I kind of look at this intersection of Creamery and the realignment of the road as the last best opportunity the township has to fix a problem that should have happened a long time ago. I know the developer did not create that problem, but it exists. The traffic light on Creamery and 332 was put in by the Delaware Joint Bridge Toll Authority probably 15 years ago when they expanded, when the plan was to expand Scudder's Fall bridge and put the sound barriers back to 332. So they paid for that improvement on the intersection at that point. I guess this is more of a question for the town. Has the town gone back to them and asked for more money or gotten their involvement in any way, shape, or form?
No, we have not. The funding source that had been how we got that traffic light back then, I've been told is no longer available from the Toll Bridge Commission. We can certainly reach out to them and see if they have other sources of funding, but that source of funding for that improvement and improvements for all host communities of the bridges is no longer in existence.
They may have a different program now, because I know on their plans, they're doing bridges further up the river where they are doing road improvements leading up to bridges and in the vicinity. So maybe a different program, but they're still funding it, or at least it's on the plan. So it's certainly worth looking into. And I think the town should be, that's not on the developer, the town should be looking into that. I drove by there yesterday again, and I've done it quite a few times. We've all done it, but we've got 3 traffic lights within like a third of a mile. And, you know, according, I think it was the Remington-Vernick letter said the 2 of them with the expanded improvements on Creamery Road to Mirror Lake Road are 328 feet apart. There are enough examples in this town of bad traffic designs or poor traffic designs. And I just feel like if we have a chance to fix this, let's do it now and take or at least make recommendations about doing it and take the developer up on their offer of engaging in a conversation with the town.
Sounds like we heard at the beginning that that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll say, if we're talking sketch plan at this point, I'd be welcome to put, I'm the chair of the board, so I set the agenda for the Board of Supervisors. I'd welcome this group to come before the Board of Supervisors and give a sketch plan presentation on the board too, so you could get the board's feedback if that's something you're amenable to. I'd be happy to do that.
I think our perspective is, it's noted in a number of the review letters that this is the largest undeveloped piece of land in the township, and you know, I'm a township resident and drive past the site all the time as well, and we're very confident in our design. I don't want to state that we're not. You know, the dynamic team has spent a lot of time on this, but we understand the scale of the project, and we want to make sure that it's done to the greatest extent possible with the township stakeholders believing that they're, you know, partners, that this is going to be a development that everybody is proud of at the end of the day. So given the scope of that, and since we have not been before you, I have not been before you on this project, and we have not been before you in the last, at least the last year and a half, I think since 2023 probably. No, we're very sincere about this being a conversation. Of course, we're going to discuss subsequent to the meeting what's been discussed by the Planning Commission and figure out the timing of subsequent meetings. I am sure, formally or informally, we would obviously welcome the supervisor's feedback. But I'm looking at this as marrying the fact that we think we have a very good plan, but we realize that the devil's in the details. So we want to advocate on behalf of the plan while also being a sponge of sorts for the comments that we at least think we can integrate, and something can always be improved upon. The question is what and to what extent.
Just one last comment that I have is, it's really for Dan, I guess, is, you know, as Shady Brook gets developed and as the Wright Farm gets developed, just more traffic in that area, and 3 traffic lights stacked up like that just isn't good.
Right, which is, to my earlier comment, clarifying things. The board has never, that's why we're so concerned about that interchange. Like you said, we all drive it regularly. I ride my bike and run it regularly too, so that's even more fun sometimes. But that remains, I've spoken to just about every board member today before this meeting and tried to, because we had heard that same statement you made, right? Obviously, you have a piece of paper that says that, and all of us, to a person, said, yeah, we never really said that. And I understand that's what you have in front of you, that's fine, but that is a township priority. I would ask, I think the estimate we were told for the realignment of about 1,500 feet of Creamery was somewhere along the lines of $7 million, which is a little more than it actually cost for the work for Prickett Preserve on the bypass 295 in Stony Hill. So I would ask that you take a realistic review of that estimate, because to me, 1,500 linear feet of a residential road that's one lane in each direction, it should be a heck of a lot less than basically two highways and a bypass interchange. So I would ask that you take another look at the actual capital cost for that.
Just so, and I know we're using the term sketch plan because it's a conversation, but there has been an absorbent amount of time, money, and engineering that went into both the original sketch plan or the original land development plan that we submitted under TORBERT Farm, and then subsequently we met with township staff. We had an engineered concept showing the alignment of Creamery Road, and the estimate that we put together. Yes, I'm aware of the work that was done on Prickett and the work that was done, but a lot of that work was done as widening and signal improvements. I mean, this is the construction of a brand-new road.
Very familiar with the process.
And associated with that comes stormwater and reallocation of all the stormwater that's existing and everything else. So we did put a lot of time, money, and effort into presenting, what we thought was the township as a whole, what it would cost and how we would do it. And we were amenable to doing it until we were given direction not to do it. And then we went forward and spent more money putting together a fully engineered plan set again, and then subsequently 4 submissions to PennDOT with the direction that we thought we were in consensus on. So, and I understand your position, and we're not here to argue that. I'm just we're using the term sketch plan. Just
since I use that, and I think it's understood, but just to underline the point, we have Justin's team has worked on this plan for almost 2 years, right? So colloquially, it's a conversation as if we were in front of you to discuss that instead of asking for action. And we are sincere about taking the comments and the feedback. I do not mean that in any way to undermine the engineering, the time, the money, the expenditure on our end. So
So if I can, first off, Mr. McGinnis, the tone of your first appearance here is completely different from the tone of prior council's first appearance here. So I think we may have been having conversations if the first appearance of prior council wasn't, you're horrible to work with, this is a by right plan. It was essentially daring us to say no. So I'm glad, though time has passed and money has been spent, we're having a real conversation. I think we would have spent the last 2 years a lot better if we'd had this conversation the first time. I would put this back to a request on you, not to say, hey, go do something, but what would you want differently from the town in terms of waivers, in terms of a zoning overlay, to build something that realigns that road, right, that fits that map vision that we're looking for, that creates a more attractive part of the community? I mean, one of the things that occurred during the term of this application was the passage of the open space ordinance. I know some developers look at that and say, oh, they're just trying to restrict us so that we build less. But if you look at the Wright Farm plans that came before us last month, there is a nice, comfortable buffer between a very major road and the backyards of those homes. The plan that we're looking at tonight, the backyards of these homes go right up to Yardley-Langhorne Road, right? Or sorry, Yardley-Newtown. That's not just a matter of quality of life for the people that live in those homes. It's not just about mitigating sound and all those things. It's about keeping the community beautiful. We're taking cornfields and we're replacing them with swing sets, right? So we want to find a way to build a better development here. Is there something we can give you that's going to lead to a better development for this community and the people that live in this town? And you don't have to answer that now, but we would be very open to having that conversation.
And that's something that we're certainly happy to have between now and whenever the next meeting is. I think Justin commented on it before, and again, predated our office's involvement, but I don't think anybody was disparaging the Creamery Road alignment and the feasibility and the desire, perhaps, just from an engineering and a functionality standpoint with traffic flow. It makes a lot of sense. It's just arriving at a point where it's designable and doable. And yes, and that was, I think, something that was seriously analyzed and was the main but not exclusive reason why there was a gap in presentations.
When I look at the plan, and I'm not a home builder, I don't know what you get from more square footage, this way or that way. Does it have to be 78 homes? I know you have a dollar amount that you want to hit, but if you go with larger properties and less homes, are you still making the dollars that you want? If you bifurcate the farm into two developments where one is a small number of very luxurious homes and the rest are these 1 acre or even mixing in some 3/4 acres, is there something that we can do to make the development as attractive to you financially that makes it more attractive to our township? I don't know how to answer those questions. I don't build homes. But that's what I would put to you guys.
Right, and that's a good question and a good comment, and I appreciate the willingness to entertain the potential anyway for creativity. And I think to your point, Mr. Coyle, we're obviously not going to have an answer to that sitting here right now.
Yeah.
But that is something that we will happily discuss.
Yeah, if you're going to have to lay all that asphalt anyways,
Right.
you lay the same amount. If you move it around differently with some less
And I don't-
homes but bigger homes, I don't know.
Right, and I don't want to be, look, I want to be as candid and transparent
Yep.
as possible. I don't want to be misleading to the planning commission. The result of that, maybe we talk and say, for Justin's point, look, we think this is the best that we're going to do, and this is something we're before you with subsequently with a resubmitted plan and revised review letters, and we move forward with it. Or maybe there is something that we can all agree is an improvement. I don't know the answer to that sitting here this evening, but that is a conversation we will have after we leave.
If I may, Mr. Coyle?
Please.
From the board's perspective, ultimately, this is a recommending body. Yes, my board has to deal with it, kind of thing. I know, I'll pass along some early comments from my board that I think the Plan Commission may be in line with as well. We already mentioned the open space ordinance. It's really a density development ordinance. This clearly wasn't designed with that in mind. It passed after your initial design was submitted. I would say there have been significant design changes to this layout relative to the initial one, relative to the permitting that I do in my day job. That would be considered significant design changes. So I would encourage this team to review that ordinance. In addition to what Mr. Coyle said, I think the board and the planning commission, not to speak for the planning commission, but the board of supervisors, is open to other ideas, whether it's within the the auspices of the open space ordinance. If there's different ways you can move things around, whatever it may be, to get more buffers, to get more open space. I like the idea of connectivity, keep that going, that kind of thing. In addition to that, one of the things on our agenda tonight is a updated stormwater management ordinance. It had been updated since your initial submittal about a year ago. I don't know if this includes reference to those updates, but we have significant updates coming that will probably advertise at our next Board of Supervisors meeting next week. And that's on the agenda tonight. So if you could take a look at that, see if you could incorporate some of those items, I think that would be helpful. And then generally, if you read social media and comments on this particular plan, they're not nice, generally. People are, I think, looking for some creativity, something a little more modern in the layout, something that isn't so, forgive me for saying cookie cutter, I'm for lack of a better word, but something a little more unique, open to different densities. I think we are generally. We'd have to look at it, obviously. And then just something a little more unique that connects better to the flavor of the township, for lack of a better term. We're just trying to get something a little better, a little different, a little more modern, that takes into consideration all of the stormwater management and flooding issues that this township has been trying to address over the last 2 years since the flood of 2023 that killed 7 people, right? And several people lost their lost their property. So we're trying to address that with these new ordinances. This one here, I believe those basins drain into a creek across the street that 2 years ago, maybe we had another subdivision that drains through a creek into wetlands, into a forested area, into someone's backyard that's also a creek. They have a dam there and a pond, and then ultimately a floodplain after that. So it's part of a larger watershed that have had historic issues. So, old school basins aren't really what we're looking for anymore. We're looking for green infrastructure, as it were, and I know you know what that means, Justin. So just those types of features. I'm not going to tell you how to design it, but just some thoughts about where the board's coming from with and that's why this group, our group, other groups within the township have been updating our ordinances pretty much nonstop for the last 2 or 3 years, just to try and address all of those issues that have been a major concern for a long time, but we finally have the people in place to make those changes. So that's my soapbox for now, but if you could kindly consider that. And like I said, I'll leave the door open if your team would like to come before the Board of Supervisors after you've given it some thought and do a sketch plan review there too. Happy to have you on there. We can talk through Mr. Kratzer when he gets back and see how we can schedule that once you've had a chance to spin that around a little bit.
Okay, understood. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
I'll finish my comments and then open to anyone else. I mean, really, what it comes down to for me is you're not asking for a lot of waivers at this point. We get that. I'll feel a hell of a lot better voting yes if you just, hey, all right, here's something else we could do. Do you want to have that conversation? Yes, no, all right, let's move on. Ginny?
Do you have any? Oh, okay. I guess maybe this first question I have is more for the board, for the Planning Commission, I'm sorry. You could do a cluster with the same amount of homes. You could do a cluster with more homes. You could do a cluster with less homes. I think for me, the idea of cluster is just, however it goes, is a positive one. And like you, I don't build houses, but I don't know what the difference would be between, I'm talking from the developer's point of view in terms of how much money you get out of each property, houses on half acres or houses on, because most of the northern end of the township is houses on either half acres or third acres. I think there's only one development in the north part of the township that the houses are on 1 acre lots each. I mean, it seems to me that I don't see, again, I don't build houses, but I don't see a huge difference. And I also, between building large houses in a cluster situation on less acreage and then leaving more open space, whether it be farmland preservation or buffers or whatever. So I do like the idea of the cluster development. And the other thing I was going to mention is the TORBERT farm, as you go down Yardley-Newtown Road to the east, it's sort of the entrance to the township. And the Patterson farm, which is owned by the township, is right across the street. It's part of the viewscape when you come into Lower Makefield. The idea of maybe having some, and again, I don't want to push farmland preservation too much, but the idea of having either fields in the front or buffering or whatever would contribute to that viewscape. I mean, from the township, I think from the township's point of view. I did have a question about Palomino. I thought in the last iteration, Palomino was just going to be an emergency entrance. So this is a change from the last plan. I mean, I guess that's neither here nor there now. But I think it was going to be emergency only with bollards and so forth.
We may have offered the same sort of concession that it could be. We don't need it. Obviously, Palomino Way was a dead-end street proposed to be connected when TORBERT Farm was to be developed. So
Right.
Good planning is to put an entrance there. As Mr. McGinnis said, we have no preference. It doesn't need to be. But again, it's shown now to be a connection, whether that's emergency access only or full public access is to be discussed.
And I think, Ms. Torbert, just addressing one of the comments or questions about how we arrive at a design, in my opinion, generally we're looking at an attempt to marry both the home builder's product with the community's ordinance to the greatest extent possible and find where those 2 points meet. So our client generally, not exclusively, but generally builds high-end, nice, single-family, detached dwellings on lots that are, an acre plus. And then you look at the underlying ordinance, and I understand the comments regarding some of the revisions and flexibility, and you marry the ordinance constraints with the product that a home builder likes to build, and then the plan, I don't want to oversimplify this, but the plan almost creates itself in terms of the density, and then you try to design it the best you can with the layout, the stormwater facilities, utilities, infrastructure, connections, et cetera. I think what we have heard this evening is the second portion of that, which is the ordinance constraints, and again, without putting any words in your mouth, Mr. Coyle, but the ordinance constraints, there may be some flexibility if there's the possibility to have a situation where our product is still viable in a layout that makes sense. Maybe we're not in the box that's prescribed that we walked into in the beginning.
Yeah.
Again, maybe not. Maybe
If you come
this
back
is-
with 112 homes,
Yeah.
then you wasted your time.
Right.
But yes.
So again, I don't want to overpromise anything, but that's how we arrive at the layout that we arrive at the beginning. And you're saying, and I appreciate the comments that there may be flexibility on the board's end. We will have conversations on our end and see what the results of those are.
Staying on Palomino real quick, Justin, this is going to be a really naive question. Is there a way that you can look at what Google Maps would do, how they would route if that connection existed?
Like from a GPS standpoint,
Like, will it-
Yeah, because I look at the map and I don't see how that would how people would logically want to go that route and add 2 or 3 turns to get into the neighborhood.
correct. It's really going to be it's really just another point of access to the community, which is never a bad thing to have another point in and out. But you're right. I mean, I don't think someone is going to go through Clydesdale
I would
Circle
still
to
see
go
it as
out.
emergency access anyways, and you're just saving the fire department a little bit of time to have to cut a chain or get out and get the key and unlock the chain.
Not a cut through.
Yeah.
You don't need a chain, though. There's plenty of places that just have kind of sign that says EMS, whatever emergency, they just put kind of signs up and,
You're correct. I mean, it's really, as far as a benefit, it's not going to be a cut through for people to, you're not getting to the bypass any faster. It's not going to serve that sort of benefit.
I think at the point at Troilo, what they had done was they had there was an emergency access back onto Yardley Langhorne, right? And they were going to
Correct.
put grass inside of pavers essentially.
I believe so.
Yeah, so it didn't look like a road. People wouldn't make the mistake of driving over it, but it's still there as open emergency access.
Yeah, and from a practical point of view, the traffic you'd get between the 2 developments would be if someone was making a UPS delivery or post office delivery, they might cut through from one to another. Neighbors, visiting neighbors in the other development would cut through. But to cut through just to drive through isn't going to happen.
So it wouldn't really practically become a through road. It would, okay, cool.
Yeah, but it's something that isn't necessary for either development.
I don't think the residents of, we used to call it the ridings, I don't know if it's still called the ridings, the development behind the farm, which came, I mean, the farm was there before the development. And they left that stub street there, just for future access if the farm were ever developed. I don't see I see from the standpoint of the fire and emergency services having an emergency entrance there, but since you have 2 entrances on Creamery Road, I don't see that as being necessary enough to disturb
No.
the neighborhood there.
TJ, anything to add?
No, agree overall with everything, so, yeah, no.
I don't know, this doesn't seem like one that's really disturbing a neighborhood because it's, as Jim was pointing out, people aren't really cutting through there if that connection is made.
Yeah, it
Well, my
it
point
does
was
have a
that I
minor
don't-
benefit for the writings in that, in the case of an emergency where they only have one entrance right now, they would now have two.
Are there,
I think they have another emergency entrance at the back of the writings out to the school property.
Jim, are there driveways onto Palomino right now?
I believe the two houses are,
Yes.
come out there.
Okay. So when you had mentioned UPS trucks and mail trucks, I mean, because if I recall correctly, and there may be residents here from that development, but when there were residents here 2 years ago, and that was something that residents did raise as a concern about connecting to the cut-through. I heard you say UPS trucks and mail trucks. I said, oh, well, people do get upset about that, increasing truck traffic. But right now, when a truck makes a delivery onto Palomino, they have to make a U-turn or a K-turn, right, to exit there. So, yes, it would increase some through traffic, but it may actually be a little bit safer, all things considered. It'd be a question for the traffic engineer.
Really quick, I'm going to be quick this time.
Adrian?
No, I just have two comments.
Put that on record.
Is there a shed there?
Supporting everyone.
Remove the shed, yeah.
Fix that whole intersection. so-
There's no sheds there, Adrian, there's no sheds.
And just,
You said it, we didn't have to.
again, I don't know anything about designing neighborhoods and homes, but that's a lot of straight lines. And that encourages a lot of speeds that probably should be faster than they should be.
And again, I mean, I've been part of this project longer than Mr. McGinnis has, so I can kind of speak to the design process and the iterations that we've gone through. Yes, there was always concerns about the linear streets in this neighborhood. Obviously, your ordinance has 1 acre lot requirements. It's a rectangular lot. When you lot it out to make it the most efficient layout from a stormwater road utility layout, you do get rectangular lots. I mean, yes, it is I'll call it a boring linear layout, but you'll be only seeing that from an aerial view personally.
No,
And as you go through it, it's fine. But we did address the issues of speeding through the neighborhood. All the intersections are three-way stop controlled, so they're going to have stop controls at each point. The speed limits, the streets are going to be reduced in width. That was part of the discussion there, so that, it doesn't, 36-foot wide streets encourage, I mean, it's wider than the bypass. So we did reduce the streets, limit parking to one side. We did have a number of discussions. We looked at, again, when we were realigning Creamery Road, we did have a more creative layout because of the way that realignment worked. Again, through what we thought was many discussions with the township, we went back to the original layout and back to where we are now. There was a couple concerns about the view shed off of the bypass, just to speak to that quickly. Again, on the Wright Farm, there was obviously concerns too about farmland preservation, and then ultimately now we're moving back to the open space with trees. But on this one, to maintain, these are 1 acre lots. So from the bypass to the back of a house, that building envelope is going to be well over almost 100-some feet. So you're going to have a pretty substantial buffer between those two. And if you look at it, and you can't see it here on the plan, but I can show you up on the screen, it's going to be a berm with a large amount of plantings to kind of protect that view shed at the back of the houses. Now, I know that's not the farm field that everyone is asking about, but we did address that. We did try to enhance the buffering along the streets.
Would it be possible to bring an elevation rendering of that to the
Sure.
the final?
Yeah, no, we could render what it's going to look like as you drive down that street and what you're going to see. And
Do you have that on your plans somewhere? Maybe not a rendering, but just a sketch of the berm and the landscaping?
Jim, I don't think I do. But we can show it either. We could do the 2D version, just showing you the berm and the elevation from the road. We can also do a 3D rendering of just as you're driving down the road, what it's going to look like, because
I'd like to see it. I mean, I live on a 1 acre lot, not too far from here, and if the backyard butted up to the road,
Yeah.
my kids don't always bring their crap in. You'd see it.
I live about a mile up the street, not even, so I drive past it every day too. So I understand that. And again, stormwater concerns, that was another neighbor concern that we were here. I think one of the neighbors up in the ridings has, now she has I believe, a culvert that cuts through her yard or an easement between her yard. There's a pretty big chunk of the farm which is actually diverted up to the north. We spoke at that first Planning Commission meeting, and we addressed the concern because we're taking all the stormwater that is going north, collecting it and into the basins. Now, it's a misconception with farm fields that they actually are good at stormwater. They're not. Row crops are actually terrible. All the water really runs right off of the farm. There's absolutely zero stormwater controls on this farm right now. So there was a concern about downstream flooding. Everything on this 110 acres, especially when it's cultivated, flies off of the farm uncontrolled. So as part of this development, we are meeting all rate, volume, water quality controls, the stormwater basins. There's actually already going to be a significant improvement of stormwater management flowing off of the site. That is your stormwater regulations already are pretty extensive right now. MPDS is probably closer to what you made your ordinance look like now, and we already have our MPDS permit. So the basins they look green on the plan. They're planted with a bioretention media that is going to be a green infrastructure, and it does substantially improve the stormwater management of the thing. So again, I'm just giving you a little bit of a history lesson because we did have 12 months of discussion with township staff about the plan and how we got here today. So just out of respect from the client, I just want to present that to everybody. I know we're kind of starting a different course here tonight, but
Understood. Yeah, and listen, we see you got a letter back, right? And then on the letter it says that the board has decided they don't want to do this. So we all understand those things.
that letter triggered a whole slew of full site design and PennDOT improvements, and
Understood.
and now we're being told differently.
And I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think we're asking you to go for a fully engineered plan and come back and invest all the money. I mean, Mr. Grenier offered to have you come before the Board of Supervisors for something informal. If you did want to come back with an informal site rendering and say, is this a road that you think you might want us to go down? And if so, we'd need X, Y, and Z to do that. And I think that would be respectful of your time and of the township.
We have that plan.
Okay. So let's do that. All right. I'd like to hear from public comment. I assume we have some public comment in the room. So let's give the folks a chance to talk. Come on up. When you get to the microphone, please state your name and whether or not you are a township resident. Make sure you speak close to the mic.
Hi, I'm Kathy Tipton, 1070 Creamery Road. I am a resident, and that is right across the street from my house. So I've been here before, so the viewscape that we bought our house for is going to be gone. The farm that I see, the sunset, all going to be gone. Did we know at some point that it probably would? Yes. But nothing like this. Our biggest concern is, of course, the traffic. I can't get out of my driveway now. Sometimes I can't even pull into my driveway because people are on my butt. I actually have to stop. So the speed limit on that road is horrendous. People think they're on the Autobahn. We can't get in the driveway, can't get out of the driveway, and that's going to be a mess. You have 2 exits and entrances on Creamery Road, and then you're going to make it bigger towards Yardley-Newtown Road. So what is that actually going to do to the property in front of my house? I mean, I love all the foliage in front of my house. I love all that stuff. I don't want to look at somebody else's house, but we're just worried about the traffic, the road, the water going down. The first entrance there where Barbara's house was across the street, that's 1566 LLC now. That's where the water 2 years ago was up at people's car doors. So to say that we're concerned and we're highly upset is an understatement, but I just want us to be heard that this has been my house since 1999, and I want to keep it to the viewscape that I bought, not thinking that I get off from work and I'm coming home off of 95, 295, whatever it's called now, to see that. That's all.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room? Any public comment online? Any further comment from the commission?
I just wanted to mention a couple things. The road, and I'm not sure what it's called now, the road in the development that's closest to 332. Right, is that still about 300 feet from the intersection? It's a short distance from the intersection.
This right here?
Okay. That is a little short.
Sorry, just for the record, because Justin didn't have a microphone, he said yes, he indicated.
Yes, it is. Thank
Yes.
you. And yes, Mr. Torbert, that was brought up in a number of the letters, so that the way that the stacking lanes, the turn lanes, and then there's actually both turn lanes. We worked with PennDOT. The intersection, that distance between those two intersections meets PennDOT criteria, and the design of that intersection, and I believe we're going to be working with your township traffic engineer to further assure everybody that the stacking that needs to occur within that distance is sufficient based on the turn lanes and the length of that turn lane. So yes, that was a concern. It was brought up. It is going to need to be a waiver based on the technical criteria of your ordinance, but PennDOT is satisfied with that stacking distance.
I just want to, if in this reconceptualization or whatever we're going to call it, to throw into the mix that it would be nice if that entrance, wherever it is, was further down. I mean, because 300 feet, I know when I lived on the property, PennDOT came in, and when they put the loop ramp in, they put the loop ramp, I think you can see it on there, within 300 feet of my driveway. And entering became very difficult because 2 lanes came into one right behind me, and the number of times I saw cars go into cornfields and so forth and almost hit me in the back. So I'm just not real thrilled with 300 feet is what I'm trying to say. And I'm just saying if in the reconsideration or whatever, or reconceptualization, we cannot have a road that close to 332, I think that would be a good thing. And the only other thing I was going to mention is, and I don't know if this happens during development, but sound absorbers. They're going to be those houses that are along 295, they're going to need sound barriers. Now, I don't know, does that happen post-construction? I don't know how that works. We did not get one. If you head, I guess it's north, you'll see that many of the developments to the north have, including the Ridings, have sound barriers. I was told we did not qualify for a sound barrier because we were only one house. And there was no way they were going to give a sound barrier for one measly house. But since you have, well, in whatever plan, you're probably going to have some houses close to 295. And there is a lot of growth now. There's a hill there down to 295. There is a lot of growth there. But I think at some point you're going to need sound barriers for those homes. And that's all I have.
I think on Ginny's point about the 300 feet, can that be like a no left turn or no left turn out, I guess, of that, maybe as a compromise?
I guess right turn out, so you're more concerned, I guess, with
You can go right
The issue
turn,
is
yeah, you can go
normally the
right
right,
turn.
'cause you queue
If you're
back.
coming down Creamery, you can't make a left in the development, because that'll stack up then,
And-
the whole traffic, or, maybe it's,
And we do understand the point, I mean, obviously, but we did work with PennDOT. It'll be a full access driveway, and it is safe based on site distances, travel speed, and the anticipated traffic. It's not, this neighborhood does not produce a whole lot of traffic in and out of that, and it's split between 2 intersections. So, but we did have that conversation with PennDOT.
okay. Just worried about traffic backing up there, if someone's making a left
Sure.
turn during, either school time or, busy 5 o'clock time, that now this traffic's gonna back up now on,
Yeah.
Yardley-Newtown Road, so.
And it's important to note too, with all the improvements being proposed on this plan, all of the intersections and all of those travelways show a level of service increase, so an improvement on all the level of services based on the turn lanes. So it's important to note.
Thank you.
Justin, technical question for you.
Yes.
When I look at the sheet 89, just your basic grading plan layout. And I'm sure there's a zoomed-in version of it somewhere. But
Yes.
let's see if my eyes can adjust to this scale because it's pretty small. But when I look at, geez, I'm getting old. I think it's pod 3, swale north discharge. Sorry if I'm getting away from the mic. And then the pod 4, swale south discharge.
Correct.
Sorry.
You did good. That's it.
Thank you.
Point of discharge, yes.
Yes. When I look at aerial photography, both of those discharge points on the other side of Creamery appear to be existing streams, probably unnamed tribs to Buck Creek, maybe? Just considering. And then, so your discharge from both of your basins eventually would go to those 2 creeks?
So, and just both of those, so the way stormwater, obviously, not to educate just, but for the rest of the board, the way stormwater works, those are existing points of discharge. So if you look at it now, the whole farm flows really down to those 2 points where they're conveyed underneath Creamery Road onto the other side of Creamery Road into existing easements, so drainage easements on both sides of those roads. So, yes, to your point, those are going to be maintained points of discharge along the property. So that's what we're permitted to do. But in order to permit this design, all of that has to be decreased within your rate control, volume control.
Reverse, yeah, which, again, we'd encourage you to look at our new stormwater management ordinance because it's that much better. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes. The one thing I wanted to ask, because obviously there's existing culverts, as you just mentioned, right, that drain from the farm. Just looking at aerial signatures, you can't see it on here, obviously, it's the proposed condition, but in the precondition, and I haven't seen any sort of existing conditions, discussions, reports, et cetera, about features on the site. Again, point-in-time aerial photos, there seem to be 2 clearly channelized areas with what looks like bed and bank that get to those culvert points that drain to the 2 existing unnamed tributaries to Buck Creek. Again, aerial. So was there a wetland delineation done or anything like that to determine if those are waters of the U.S. or not?
Sure. So there's the whole site. You talking on-site or off-site?
I would, yes, I'm just for reference.
I see where you're going. So there's,
Yeah, so it's probably easy, the brightness.
There's 2 points of discharge. One comes out through, and I can do it on this one, Jim. There's a farm swale that comes through, discharges, and then runs through a channel through here, which is an existing easement for discharge, obviously from the farm to eventually to Buck Creek. Similar down here, farm swale, which comes down underneath Creamery Road into an existing culvert, which then discharges into an existing stream, which is enclosed within an existing easement, which runs all the way down to Buck Creek. So, yes, the entire site had a wetlands investigation completed. No, there's no wetlands on site. The only natural resource that is on site is a small pocket of very, very, I'll call it steep slopes. But when we did funny story, when we did the site walk with the Planning Commission a couple years ago, a couple members couldn't even believe that they're being documented as steep slopes because they're not really that steep. But the only natural resource on the property is a small pocket of steep slope, which is going to be protected to the extent required. But none of these features on site are wetlands.
Dan, I don't know if you know, but the 2 swales that Justin is referring to were put in at the direction of the Bucks County Conservation District about, I want to say, 10 years ago. There's also, at the back of the property, between the property and the ridings, there are some, I don't know what you call them, drainage.
Like diversion berms, swales that go running around the back.
There's plantings, but there's a big drain that water that flows that way goes into that drain that's right in the back of somebody's property in the.
Correct. That's another drainage easement which flows to the north to Clydesdale Circle through another easement, another pipe. That's the one which we are actually going to be reducing the flow from because it's unmanaged right now. It's flowing off of our property towards an existing residential neighborhood. There's concerns that uncontrolled flow when it's in farm just flows right off. So that's actually going to be controlled for our basins now. But
just for your own benefit, did the Conservation District require any drainage easements be placed over those swales?
No. No, it's an active farm, so the farms obviously operate a little differently than the rest of properties to the township, but Ms. Tor will even say that farm swale could move year after year. It's completely unregulated. It can be filled in. It was strictly because, like I said, when crops are in season, the water off of the crops flows pretty quickly, and it gets captured into the swale, it gets channelized and directed off-site. That's
So
how.
Your basic plan, though, for drainage perspective is to leverage the existing culverts that they drain to collect water beforehand and then drain it out.
That's all stormwater designed, correct, yeah. So we maintain existing, you're required to maintain existing points of discharge off of a site, so from a pre to post. And that's where the reductions occur, from the existing flow to this point of discharge to the proposed flow. And then your ordinance says, all right, if the 100-year flow is 100 CFS in the pre-existing, we want it at 50 in the post with all this, and that's how stormwater works, and that's what we're complying with.
Did you want to come up and make a comment? Yeah, please. It seemed topical, Mr. Grenier.
Sure.
Hi, Karen Fell, 1550 Doe Trail Lane, obviously a township resident. So it's my understanding that a while ago, like 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, the owner of the property on the corner of Creamery and Doe Trail on his own decided to change the way the culvert crossed over and did his own construction. And I believe that somebody issued him a stop work at some point, but, because he did stop work, but is there a way just to confirm through as-built or something like that, to go back in the history and make sure that that existing culvert is properly constructed in alignment with?
Yeah, we actually had violation notices issued by the township. We made him remove items that were not permitted to be in that drainage swale and restore it back to the way it was, with some minor modifications to improve it for him and for the community. And I think everything is flowing good there, except for you get sometimes corn stalks coming and clogging it. And when the Creamery Road was repaved 4 or 5 years ago, I think they did some additional work along the swales along the road to better channel the water into that swale so it didn't jump over the road. And I think you've probably seen mud going down Doe Trail Lane.
Right, a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think since they've done that work, that hasn't happened.
Oh, no, it still happens.
Okay. Oh, well,
But, I mean, it's not like a huge deal, but it does still happen.
okay.
Hey, Justin, just to follow up, when you did I do stormwater design. When you did your topographic survey and you got your pipe inverts and all that, did you grab off-site too, just to confirm?
We did, and we also pulled, I'll call it deeds and title of the properties across the street to confirm the existence of that easement.
Okay.
So that's all plotted, and
Did you notice anything unique there, just in case?
Well, no, I think as Mr. Majewski said, it was obvious there were some modifications done to that one, but it was restored. And, we will be connecting into that and substantially improving the flow going through that area. So hopefully that helps.
Okay. I just wonder if you needed to make any changes to that
No,
because of
no.
what was done.
We're connecting into it as based on our survey.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're not voting on a preliminary and final today, but does RVE have any questions for the applicant while they're in the room?
I don't believe so. We put together a pretty comprehensive review letter, and we're happy to meet with the applicant's team if they have anything they want to review on that. Most of our comments that were significant, I think, were related to stormwater, just making sure everything gets conveyed safely through the inlets, and that there's not a lot of like ponding in the future roads, and Dynamics seemed pretty amenable to meeting with us and making sure that those concerns are kind of addressed, and so I think everything is pretty much in our review letter.
Anybody else have any questions for the applicant while they're in front of us before someone makes a motion to table the matter? Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to table the matter.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
so we have a motion to table the application to the next meeting of the Planning Commission. Any comment from the commission? Any public comment? Any comment online? Hearing none, I will call the question. Those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, so now on to item number 5 on our agenda, which is just one single sentence. Proposed stormwater ordinance updates.
Okay.
Who wants to introduce this?
I'll introduce it. J.J. Robinson from HRG will be entering the room, and there he is. Basically, you may recall, we were in front of the Planning Commission a few months ago. Gave you initial draft of the ordinance. At that time, you kind of took a quick look at it. We then came up with a subcommittee of at least one member of the Planning Commission, member or two, I think just one from the EAC, Daniel Grenier from the Board of Supervisors, myself, and I think Dave Kratzer had been in the meeting. Dan McClune had also been in a few of the meetings too, to sort of go over that. And based on that, I think we've come up with an ordinance that JJ can then go ahead and present to you what the basic overall big picture of everything is. And then if you guys have any questions on any specific items within the ordinance, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, you have 3 members here. Just before JJ jumps in, he did a great job. He presented to the Board of Supervisors last week in detail. One of the things that, it was a discussion item where we did not vote to advertise, although some people may have wanted to. I thought it was important to bring it back to both the Planning Commission and the EAC this week to review and comment, make a recommendation, et cetera. And then the goal is at our next Board of Supervisors meeting on the 19th to advertise based on final comments. So with that, just want to give you a little intro because I know that hasn't always happened that way, and I wanted to be respectful of the Planning Commission.
And we do appreciate you respecting the best commission in Lower Makefield Township.
Absolutely.
All right, JJ, it's your show.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Robinson. Most people call me JJ. And tonight I will be discussing the updates to Lower Makefield Township Stormwater Management Ordinance. So now that I've introduced myself, if you don't mind, I will share my screen, and I have a quick presentation to go through that will highlight the updates to the ordinance that we have been working through at this point. So our agenda for tonight, I will quickly hit on the goals of the updates of the Stormwater Management Ordinance. We'll highlight some of the key sources we utilize to pull the information for the updates to the ordinance. We'll just discuss our process to update the ordinance. We'll walk through some of the major updates to the ordinance by article within the ordinance, and then we'll summarize our key findings from our endeavor. So in general, the main goal of updating the Stormwater Management Ordinance was to provide a comprehensive and modernized ordinance. And when I say modernize, I mean to meet the current and also projected stormwater management regulations that have been given to us by the regulating bodies, including PADEP and the county through Act 167 plans. The ordinance will also address stormwater quality and quantity, introduce construction standards for stormwater facilities, and also promote innovative best management practices, or BMPs, through low impact development and green infrastructure, LID and GI respectively. And by doing this, we should hopefully accomplish the minimization of impacts of unmanaged stormwater, increase the quality of life of residents within Lower Makefield Township, and also enhance the resiliency of more frequent and intense storm events. So I won't go into detail from each source that we pulled information from for this ordinance, but I would like to highlight 2 key sources that are forward thinking in our process. And that is the last bullet point under the ordinances. That is the draft PADEP 2028 model ordinance. As we were going through the stormwater management ordinance revisions with the township staff and key members, the PADEP released their draft MS4 permit for the next MS4 cycle. And within that permit, there is a new model ordinance. And so the major points from that model ordinance regarding stormwater calculations, we included in our ordinance itself. And then the other key source that we pulled from for forward thinking was also a draft technical guidance from PADEP. That is the PCSM manual, or post-construction stormwater management manual. Again, that's in draft form, but that should be coming to fruition and formally adopted by PADEP within the next year or two. And that document will replace the existing PADEP BMP manual, or as I previously stated, best management practices manual. So here's a quick overview of the process that we went through to update the stormwater management ordinance. We initially kicked off this endeavor about a year ago in February of 2024, and we went through one initial revision of the stormwater management ordinance to increase stormwater regulations within the township. That was mainly to address some low-hanging fruit to increase, as I mentioned, the stormwater calculations and capture within the township. And then from that, we developed a work plan to update the ordinance. We developed recommendations for the ordinance, presented it in front of the board of supervisors. And from those recommendations, we drafted the stormwater management ordinance, reviewed it with the township, reviewed it with the township subcommittee. And here we are today, hopefully looking for the adoption process to move forward. So before I update it or jump into the stormwater management updates itself, is there any questions from the Planning Commission that I can address right now? Hearing none, I will move forward on discussing the stormwater management ordinance updates. Starting with Article 1, the general provisions section, we added a few new sections, including the erroneous permit section and the waivers section. This section of the ordinance is mainly your legalese section, so there's not much pertaining to stormwater impacts, but we wanted to make sure that we are regulatory compliant with the model ordinances and the Act 167 plans out there for our regulations. In Article 2, the definitions section, we added, expanded, and deleted definitions for consistency throughout the ordinance. The one key definition I would like to touch on is the impervious area definition. So in conjunction with your typically impervious surfaces like asphalt, roofs, concrete, we also wanted to confirm that traditionally semi-impervious areas like rocks, crushed stone, and aggregate would be considered fully impervious and get rid of that gray area of whether it's semi-impervious, non-impervious, or not. We took the hard stance that all of those surfaces would be considered impervious. In addition to not only rocks, crushed stone, and aggregate being considered fully impervious, other permanent water storage areas like pools and ponds would be considered fully impervious as well. On the flip side, elevated surfaces like decks and awnings with fully vegetated surfaces beneath them would not be considered impervious, and the pervious pavement, if someone were to install pervious pavement, that would be considered partially impervious in accordance with the township zoning ordinance. I would like to state that just because the definition of impervious area within the stormwater management ordinance is changing, that doesn't mean the definition within the zoning ordinance or the subdivision land development ordinance has to change. So when you may see that we're increasing the definition of what is considered impervious in this ordinance, that is mainly for stormwater control. This will not affect lot coverages for the zoning ordinance. So if someone has currently rocks or crushed stone on their lot, just because it's considered impervious for stormwater calculations doesn't mean it's considered impervious for their lot coverage, if that makes sense. Any questions on that definition as of now?
Mr. Costello was wondering why crushed stone wouldn't count as impervious. Not to speak for you, Mr. Costello, but we were just having that as a side conversation.
As in why it would not?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, why would crushed stone be impervious?
Impervious, yeah. So if you think about it, rocks, crushed stone, aggregate, whenever they get fully compacted, it basically runs off the water like it would for asphalt or concrete. And typically, whenever there is those sort of ground surfaces on a lot, they're not maintained adequately, so there is infiltration through the stone. They do get compacted over time and then would have runoff go and act like it is similar to asphalt or concrete.
Yeah. Adrian, another way to think about it is when you crush stone, it's all different sizes, so it kind of locks in.
Yeah.
And then when you get like fines on top of it and that gets wet, it turns into almost a concrete. So you get a lot of runoff versus, let's say, when you look at PennDOT, they have their different stone sizes, and like if it's a universal like 3/4 inches one, I think about a lot, or it's a universal stone size, they'll eventually get crushed, but they don't get locked in quite as much, so water can get through. It's like driving on marbles if you try to use it as an access road, though. But this is something that New Jersey does as well. But you might hear it called macadam or DGA or something like that.
But like I'm pulling something out of the hat right now, like a rock garden. I want something that doesn't have traffic. But somebody just, instead of using mulch, they might put rocks down, or they might put stone down.
Well, that's not necessarily crushed stone, though.
Or they might just put gravel down.
So I think it depends.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Like a rock garden, I don't think any reasonable person would consider that impervious. If they put a lot of like densely graded aggregate and
gotcha.
tried to use it as a patio or something like some people, that might cross over.
All right, so all right, I understand. Like I said, I have no skin in the game. I'm just.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm sure we'll get more of it.
That's the kind of stuff I would get questioned on.
Some residents, where they want to put a pool in and they already have too much impervious surface, they'll tear the driveway out and replace it with crushed stone to get around
Right.
the
And then they'll
on-site
cover
retention.
it with fines, and it'll,
Yeah.
because they don't like rolling off of it.
So now they will no longer be able to do that. They'll have to either not have a swimming pool or mitigate the water on site.
Well, and remember, we do have pervious pavement and other options that we
Yep.
we could use to mitigate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Like I said, this is more just curiosity than anything.
All good questions.
Well, this was a matter of debate back and forth
Yeah.
with so your question was valid.
Yeah.
Thank you for the discussion. One further point on that, the previous iteration of the ordinance did leave some gray area on what was the definition of what was considered impervious or not. It left it up to the township engineer's discretion. So we decided to, mitigate that discretion and make a hard stance. If the applicants were to provide justification for a waiver or a partial waiver of what the definition of impervious area is, then that would be subject to planning commission or board of supervisors approval. All right, moving on to the meat and potatoes of the stormwater management ordinance updates. That is Article 3, the stormwater management standards of the ordinance. So the first section that we added within this article is regarding riparian buffers. It is now required for easements to be provided for all riparian buffers around all water bodies. That includes ponds, wetlands, rivers, streams, and so forth. And that is to the greater extent of the either the 100-year floodplain or the zoning ordinance regulations for setback requirements. And then also within this section, we did provide minimum management requirements for those riparian buffers. So whenever an applicant is required to install an easement for riparian buffers within their property, there are standards to maintain that riparian buffer to the standard it should be kept, as in removing invasive species if they were to arise, and then also replanting within the buffer if trees were to fall as well. The next section, section 304, stormwater management facility standards, as stated within our goals of this ordinance, was to implement standards for stormwater management facilities, and we did such that. We now prefer surface and open air BMPs to be implemented into the township. As you may be aware, underground stormwater management facilities can cause maintenance issues in the long term. So to avoid that, we prefer that the open air stormwater facilities are implemented, like rain gardens, detention basins, infiltration facilities, and so forth. We also recommend that non-structural and green infrastructure best management practices are implemented throughout the lot. So we avoid the situation of having just one large detention facility in the corner of a lot. Now stormwater management can be more dynamic and spread throughout a lot itself. And then we added standard construction requirements for those BMPs or stormwater facilities that would be implemented on those lots. Next section, in close conjunction to stormwater management facility standards, is the conveyance facility standards. This is basically for any stormwater facility that would convey stormwater from one place to another, such as your storm sewer, gutters, and swales. The next section, section 306, this starts going into our calculation methodologies for stormwater. We added some clarification on the design storms that will be utilized for calculations. We added some guidance for the methodology of time and concentration calculations. And then probably the big one that we'll touch on tonight, for major stormwater permits, that is any stormwater management plan with greater than 5,000 square feet of impervious area. 100% of the existing impervious area on the lot will now be considered meadow. And the reasoning behind this is typically whenever there is a redevelopment within the township, those facilities have not utilized stormwater calculations and facilities that meet current day standards. So we're basically backtracking and confirming that those lots that may not have had stormwater facilities implemented in them whenever they were first constructed now meet standards that are set forth today. So just a comparison note, the minimum requirements for the percent of existing impervious area that is considered meadow within a lot is 20%. And if you think about it, if you have a lot that is 10,000 square feet of impervious area, whenever you are redeveloping it on the minimum management side, 2,000 of that square feet impervious area would be considered green space. So you would only have to manage that extra 2,000 square feet of impervious area that is now being implemented. In our ordinance now, it'll basically consider that lot as completely green. So now you have to manage the stormwater for the entirety of that impervious area. Before I move on to the next slide, are there any questions on that note? Hearing none, I will move on. The next section within Article 3 is Section 307, the volume control standards and methodology section. We're increasing the amount of stormwater that will be captured on the lot by 20%, and we are making it a requirement to reuse, evapotranspire, or infiltrate the entirety of the stormwater volume requirement on site. Evapotranspire is just a fancy word for whenever plants capture water and then it evaporates into the air.
Thank you.
Section 308, peak rate control standards and methodologies. We are now consistent with Act 167 ordinances, and we are decreasing the peak rate of stormwater leaving the site. So not only have we increased the amount of stormwater that is held on site and infiltrated in the ground back into the aquifer, but we are also reducing how fast stormwater leaves the site by 80% of the peak existing rate. So whenever you do your stormwater calculations, you model it as if there is no development on site, and then you model it whenever there is development. And the goal is in your post-development conditions to match your existing conditions. However, now this ordinance, we're actually reducing the how fast the stormwater leaves the site in existing conditions, which would in turn reduce localized flooding in surrounding areas. The next section, 309, water quality standards and methodologies. We included this section to meet PADEP standards, and it works in line with the PCSM spreadsheet or post-construction stormwater management spreadsheet that is provided by PADEP. Next section, 310, stream channel protection requirements. We are now consistent with model ordinances. Section 311, hotspot uses. We expanded upon this existing section to now require a stormwater pollution prevention plan for any hotspot uses. That is typically your uses that have pollutants on site that could easily enter waterways, like a gas station where fuel could run into an inlet and then enter into your local storm sewers. And then last but not least, the last section, Article 3, is Section 312, erosion and sediment control and grading requirements. We included this new section in the ordinance to now be consistent with the township's existing subdivision and land development ordinance, and also the 2028 model ordinance. Before I move on to Article 4, are there any questions on this slide so far?
I have a question. What is considered these days in 2025 a benchmark storm?
As in a real-time storm that we can gauge it off of, or are you saying how do we utilize rainfall data to model our stormwater events?
I don't understand when it says how can 80% of the peak rate for post-development storm, how does that get calculated? Like, what do you base it on?
Yeah, good question. So in its simplest form, whenever you are modeling your stormwater controls, you model it in two conditions. You model it in your existing conditions. So that is what the development looked like without any new work on it. So let's say we have an acre lot that is all grass. You would model how the stormwater leaves that site when it is all grass. And then in your post-development conditions, that's whenever it is developed. Let's say you turn your acre lot into 80% impervious. You now model your stormwater controls when it is 80% impervious. And you implement stormwater management facilities like a rain garden or an infiltration basin to reduce how fast the water is coming off that new impervious area before it leaves the site. And you also capture volume from that impervious area and infiltrate it into the ground because whenever you have a natural grass area, water naturally infiltrates. Whenever there's impervious, it doesn't. So those are your two basic requirements. And within that volume and peak rate control, you model different types of storms. You model your 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm. And what that means is basically you're increasing the amount of rainfall that you model each time. So your 1-year storm or your storm that would happen most often, you model that. And then you model that all the way up to your 100-year storm, or your storm that may only happen one every 100 years. And you see what the stormwater will act like during that storm as well. So you model a wide range of storms, all the way from your everyday storm to your once every 100-year storm. And ideally, you would be reducing the volume and the peak rate of stormwater leaving the site for all of those storms.
I guess what I'm having trouble understanding is we used to talk about storm of the century, 100-year storms, and it seems like in the last 20, 30 years, we've been getting those quite frequently. So I'm just trying to figure out how you make that calculation.
Yeah, good question. So our ordinance, it does, it references the most recent rainfall data that is available by NOAA. There is word on the street that NOAA should be releasing new rainfall data hopefully soon. Our ordinance does address that by stating that the design storm shall be modeled off of NOAA, the current version, or any latest version that replaces that. So whenever there is new data that can be utilized, our ordinance is prepared to utilize that data.
JJ,
also, yes.
This is going to sound like a flippant question, but I swear it's not. What if NOAA decides to stop releasing data and performing that science? So we don't have anything in the ordinance that contemplates that?
At this point, no, but if that is what current day practice is basing it off of NOAA data. If there is new data that is utilized industry-wide, then that should be a simple change within the ordinance.
Okay.
and that can be addressed at a later date.
So there's no second source that's reputable or a source of record where we could say, or this other if it is newer and more strict. We just have to address that at the time if it becomes a problem.
Yeah, we can also look into that if there are available sources that have been utilized. If that is the commission's desire, we can look into that.
Dan?
Sure. So, JJ, I think what the chair is referencing is there's been a lot in the news lately about NOAA, National Weather Service, et cetera, entities that are related to this data, potentially could be well understaffed or no longer have a mandate to provide certain information. To JJ's point, NOAA and National Weather Service are the standard everywhere. So if that data goes away, that not only impacts our stormwater management designs and criteria moving forward and all of the meteorological information that people use to predict the weather and deal with storms and all the
So we'll
yada,
hope
yada,
it's
yada.
something that doesn't come to pass, and if it does, you'll address it at the
We'll,
time.
we'll deal with it as it happens because
thank you.
we'll have to do it. So will everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on Article 3 before I move on? Hearing none, I will continue. Thank you for those questions and valuable insight. The next section, Article 4, the stormwater management site plan and report submission requirements. It basically increased the amount of requirements for plans that are submitted to the township to provide additional information for ease of review for township staff and also the township engineer as well. And we also clearly identified what the stormwater management report requirements are, basically the report that shows all of your calculations and how your stormwater management on-site works. We also added some special submission requirements for different investigations that are on site, including subsurface investigation and infiltration testing, wetland delineation reports, and geotechnical reports. And all of those requirements that we've added and the new submission requirements we've clearly outlined in section 404, the submission section, within a summary table for our minor and major stormwater management report permits. We added a couple new sections for submission review procedures, and last but not least, in Article 4, we added project closeout requirements, including as-built plans for both minor and major stormwater management plans, and then also post-construction infiltration testing in accordance with the new model ordinance released by PADEP. Next section, Article 5, operation and maintenance. We have included sections for performance guarantees for land development applications. Basically, applicants are now required to submit financial security for stormwater controls for land development applications. We have also required operation and maintenance plans and agreements for all stormwater permits. That is our minor and major permits. And we added language for the stormwater management facility and operation maintenance fund that allows for a maintenance fee based on the acreage of stormwater management conservation easements. So anytime there is a stormwater management facility implemented on a lot, whether that is a conveyance facility or a stormwater capture facility, they're now required to have easements, and that maintenance fee will be based on those acreage of those easements. Article 6, the fees, we basically expanded the expenses covered by fees within the ordinance. Article 7, prohibitions. Within section 701, we added an illicit discharges section in accordance with the new PADEP model ordinance. We now prohibit dumping of pollutants into waterways and storm sewers, and we prohibit open storage of pollutants on lots within section 703 and 704 respectively. And then lastly, in section 705, if a pollutant were to enter a waterway, it is now the person responsible of that substance responsibility to contact the township and DEP of any pollutants entering those waterways. And to enforce some of those prohibitions, we have expanded Article 8, the enforcement and penalty section of the ordinance, by adding increased inspection and reporting requirements for applicants and owners of stormwater management facilities. And we have also increase the notification and enforcement sections to expand upon the procedures for informing applicants of violations of the stormwater management ordinance. And last but not least, within the stormwater management ordinance, we updated the appendices to coincide with all the updates that we have made, including the stormwater management site plan application and creating a post-construction BMP investigation report. We have also updated the small site design worksheet for minor stormwater management permits, meaning if a applicant were to implement a new development that is less than 5,000 square feet of impervious area and not a commercial or industrial use, then the applicant may utilize this worksheet without engineering design, and it uses sample details and construction information for stormwater management facilities, great standards for non-structural BMP specifications to be implemented on those smaller lots, and then clearly identifies the procedures and calculation tables for ease of use of those applicants. This is typically utilized for your residents who may want to add an addition to their house or add an extension to their driveway. They can utilize this site design worksheet, submit it to township staff for their review, and that can be handled in-house or through township engineer review, but it would not need to be signed or sealed by a registered engineer to submit. Any questions on those last couple sections that I ran through of the stormwater management ordinance?
I have a question about the minor developments.
Yes.
Are residents going to have to basically hire an engineer to do this worksheet, and not the worksheet so much, but the other parts of the application?
No, they should not. So the small site design worksheet, there is a basically a plan view where the applicant can hand draw in what they are proposing to construct with simple dimensions and distances to proposed stormwater management facilities. It can be hand drawn or drawn electronically on a computer. It does not need to be generated by an engineer. And then also there is a calculations worksheet, and there is instructions that accompany the worksheet. So as long as they are able to follow the instructions and know what kind of impervious surfaces they may be implementing, as in the size of it, then they should be able to complete the worksheet without the help or aid of an engineer. And Jim, I don't want to volunteer you, but township staff should be able to walk through the worksheet as well, and they can aid residents if they need help with it.
Yeah, we've actually developed a stormwater management and impervious surface calculation spreadsheet that we have people fill out. You just put your information in, it calculates it for you, and you could really quickly figure out if you wanted to put like an infiltration trench in, should it be 3 by 6 by 20 or 4 by 8 by whatever, and you could quickly do all that. And people who don't know how to use a spreadsheet, they come in and we basically do it for them.
I was just looking at, after the worksheet, there's a diagram where you show what structural things you're putting in. And I looked at it and I thought, I would never be able to draw this thing.
Well, part of it is, I think, HRG came up with like some standardized sort of templates for people to use so that they still need assistance. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing, no matter how easy you make it. So we welcome those people to come in and we walk them through it. And I've actually had to draw up plans for people because we wanted to have it documented properly what they're doing. And so it makes sense 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Right. I just threw, with all these things, either the major or the minor, I just wonder if we're going to have to put a couch in here with a pillow for you. I mean, is townships, there's quite a lot of things to review, and is township staff going to be able to do that? Or are they going to need engineering services to do that?
Well, we already do this. It's just that this has a few extra things on it. The spreadsheet that we already have made up, the worksheet that's within the ordinance will be added to the spreadsheet as another alternative. And it won't be any more work. People are doing this now. They've been doing this for the 8 years I've been here.
Oh, they have? Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of contractors now kind of know how to do it on their own after being taught. And then we just have to correct it as opposed to having to do it for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a quick clarification.
Yes.
Section 7, the one about prohibitions, did the prohibitions against dumping and open storage and things of that sort, did they not exist before?
So they were not clearly stated in the ordinance. There is loose language about, not impacting the public health and safety of residences. The township could point to those standards within the previous ordinance, but we wanted to make it clear what prohibitions could be. We still have that general language of stating, residences shall not impact the general health, welfare, and safety of stormwater within the township, but we specifically wanted to state that dumping of pollutants shall not be allowed, and also open storage of pollutants shall not be allowed.
Okay, great. I think obviously it's a welcome change. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, hearing no other questions, I'll quickly summarize. It is our understanding, after working in conjunction with township staff and select individuals on the Stormwater Management Subcommittee, that we have created an ordinance that is regulatory compliant with the PADEP model ordinance and also the Act 167 model ordinances. We also believe that this ordinance is not only consistent with those model ordinances, but also consistent throughout the township's ordinances, including the subdivision and land development ordinance and the zoning ordinance. We also believe that this ordinance is modern, as is evident by us looking forward to those future regulations that PATEP will be implementing. And as with most stormwater management regulations, we are going towards the resilient and sustainable infrastructure that can be implemented within the township. And as I stated, we have worked in conjunction with township staff and the Stormwater Management Ordinance Subcommittee. So we have received approval and concurrence from the township itself. So on that note, I believe I answered most of your questions, but if you have any more, I'd be more than welcome to answer them. And then if not, I would give it back to Jim and Supervisor Griner if they have any additional input or insight they'd like to provide.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Supervisor Grenier.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
I say his name differently every single time I say it, and I've known him for years. It's fine.
It took me about 2 or 3 years to get it right.
I got it now. I won't forget. Don't worry.
And also Colin Coyle for his hard work, Alan Dresser, Dan McClune, Dave Kratzer. I think through the iterative process of questioning, asking questions, just as you guys had several questions about what about this, what about that. We went through many of those, so that's why JJ was able to answer it so well, because we've had some of the same questions. What about this, what about that? I think we've now fine-tuned what had been a great model ordinance 20 years ago, but has maybe fallen a little bit behind. It's back up to date and a very current modern ordinance that will serve us well, hopefully, for the next 5-10 years.
I just want to add, first off, thank you for all the work that went into this from everyone on staff, from HRG, from the board. I spoke with someone this week after the presentation to the board, and they said they just don't think that we need to have the most restrictive stormwater ordinance in the Commonwealth at this point in time. I think the residents of Maplevale would certainly have preferred that we had a more restrictive stormwater management ordinance in the past. And I think the best time to prevent flooding in Lower Makefield was 50 years ago, and it's not, if not 50 years ago, then it's tonight. So I am all for having a stormwater ordinance that holds people to account. If you want to come and bulldoze our farms and develop retail spaces and all that, you know what? Make it as beautiful as you can and hold your garbage on your own ground. So those are my thoughts.
Oh, you're looking at me. I'll just say ditto to everything that Jim and Colin both just said. I think for me, since I got on the Board of Supervisors almost 8 years ago, running on stormwater infrastructure and infrastructure improvement, sustainability, et cetera, and have been sometimes screaming from the rooftops that we need to do certain things. And then I think with the flooding events in Maple Vale, as well as some other developments that have come online that people have been very concerned about, it really lit a fire under the board and others to see what we can do to move forward. And I think this is one of those instances where we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. We came up, as Jim said, we came up with, we weren't starting from scratch. There were ordinances in place, some of which were pretty good for the time when they were initially passed, and we're just trying to update things, make them a little more modern. As JJ said, there is a model ordinance coming out now that some of the reason we say we're the most, someone might say we're the strictest or the most stringent ordinance is because we're aligning with that, and that's going to be the norm over the course of the next few years across the Commonwealth as everyone else has to catch up. We're just a couple of years ahead of that. Do we have a few other items that are maybe a little unique? Yes, but I would say I've written these ordinances in the state of New Jersey, the state of Florida, and other places, and we're not as strict as they are. They have different issues to deal with than we do, and I think this is a nice, this gets us up to snuff and allows us to address stormwater management issues in the future. Couple that with our open space ordinance, some other things that we're doing, our green development ordinances, et cetera, and it puts us in a very nice spot moving forward. And these, again, like Jim said, this will get us through the next several years, but we can't sit on our butts too long because we'll have to look for ways. These are organic ordinances, right? They're fluid, and we need to keep an eye out for them to see how we can improve them in the future. So this is the first step. So I appreciate everyone's help.
Thank you. Any further comment from commission members?
I have a couple questions, just I think 2 more questions. Is there anything we can do? I know we've had this low-impact development ordinance in for a while, but has anybody really taken advantage of it? And is there any way that this can leverage them to take advantage of it?
So this was, and I'll let JJ chime in here in a second, we considered the LID ordinance here. That's why you see when the definition of impervious there, when he gave the quick examples, the last one was related, kind of sort of related to LID, porous pavement, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. This, when you have a lot of different ordinances to choose from, it can confuse folks, and they just kind of say, you know what, I'm just going to go with this one and go with it because it's simpler. And so I think this ordinance now attempts to pull those together as much as possible so that it's clear this is the path, these are the paths you can take, or this is the path you should take, so that it's a little more prescriptive and straightforward. Folks have tried, developers, others have tried to use LID. There is some concern about porous pavement sometimes and how long it'll last, how expensive it is, et cetera, which is really what that pushes. But we're trying to pull that into this ordinance so we can have one-stop shopping.
And then my last question, and I'm just taking my old OMB hat off here, but is there any way to calculate, I'm talking about now comparing the current ordinance with the new one, the additional hours of paperwork, the additional fees that will, and I'm focusing mainly on the minor developments, the person that owns maybe 3 acres and a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot house, how much more are they going to have to spend, and how much more time are they going to have to devote? Is there any way to do that calculation, or is it too variable? I don't know.
I can speak specifically on the minor stormwater permits. I think as Mr. Majewski mentioned earlier, that the township already has a minor stormwater management permit and named a different format. However, this new minor stormwater management permit is in close alignment with that. We are just adding a few additions to it to hopefully help with clarification, and also add additional stormwater management facility alternatives, including tree plantings and also impervious area disconnection that actually may lessen the impact of the implementation of structural stormwater management facilities like rain gardens or infiltration trenches, and create a more natural stormwater management practice by implementing trees and whatnot. That may be a little harder on the calculation sense, but as I mentioned, we do clearly lay out a process within the permit to identify that. It may take an extra 30 minutes to try and understand what the permit is getting at, but I don't believe in the long run it will have a detrimental impact to residences.
That reminds me, is there a reason that you cannot use your non-structural remedies like trees and rain gardens and rain barrels and whatever to mitigate more than 25% of the total that you have to mitigate? Is there a reason that's limited to 25%?
So that is current guidance from PADEP. That is within the BMP manual, and also has been referenced in the PCSM manual. That guidance may be subject to change in the future, and if so, that could be an amendment to the ordinance in the future.
I was just wondering why you would think you'd want to encourage that sort of thing rather than the structural.
Understood. Yeah, I agree. I think the previous thought is that maybe non-structural BMPs may not have the same impact as structural. However, I think after the years have gone by with more modern stormwater management regulations, we understand that non-structural BMPs may actually have a better impact than structural BMPs in some respects. So I think we are catching up with the times on non-structural and more natural stormwater management controls, but until PADEP changes their recommendations, I think it's best practice to formalize
Stick
with
with
them.
that one. Okay, thank you.
And Ginny, I'll say in defense of the limit, we've had it come up here in the past where, well, you could just plant a couple of trees and then you're mitigated and you're good to go and you get your approvals, and then 5 years later you decide, I don't want those trees there, right? And the trees go away, right? So it's, with the lack of permanence, it makes it, next homeowner may not realize that that's stormwater management, and the problem comes back.
I love the idea of the rain gardens, but I understand they require a lot of maintenance and.
It's a garden. Yeah, no,
Right,
I'm,
right.
I'm joking.
True.
No, they do and they don't. If they're planted correctly and they're managed without a whole lot of, like a garden, maybe not even as much. Like, I did my master's thesis on this stuff. So, and then Philadelphia Water Department has a great program called the Backyard Buffer Program, where they work with landowners, homeowners in Philadelphia to develop things like backyard rain gardens, all rain barrel programs, the whole nine. I used to manage that for them years and years ago. And it's just a nice homeowner by homeowner, very small scale, micro scale, pardon the pun, drops in the bucket along the way, but they add up over time. So the water department was doing pretty innovative stuff, almost 20 years ago, to that end. So that's kind of rain gardens, depending on which one you're talking about, could be something very small like that a homeowner manages. Or I think one of the applicants we heard earlier was talking about the basins they were providing were actually going to be planted similar to a very large rain garden. So it depends on how they're designed and what the purpose is in terms of how much maintenance they will be. But all of these things, whenever you put water somewhere, do ultimately require some maintenance. So it will require, if someone wants to have that extra impervious area, then yes, they do have to do a little work to maintain it, but it's not that much in my personal experience doing that stuff.
So if, for example, with TORBERT or any other development, if they wanted to put in more large-scale rain gardens, which, you know, they're prettier than the basins we have, would that be a homeowners association?
No, so no, not necessarily. So they could, and we've seen this, I think, Jim, on other developments, they could come in as part of the site plan process and do smaller drainage areas that go specific to smaller rain gardens along the way in terms of the treatment train before they get to the discharge points. And that serves to spread out the stormwater management over the whole area. Now, those would be deed restricted, and you have to have an operations and maintenance plan to manage that as part of the stormwater management system. But they would be integrated into that system. But they would just be smaller drainage areas that would feed into there and managed that way. And they'd be modeled differently than a big basin. That's actually encouraged to some extent because it does break it up.
And the O&M could be the HOA, to Ginny's point, right, would be responsible.
Ultimately, yeah.
But they could come up with something alternate. They could pay some money to the township, and that could be part of the plan.
Ultimately, HOAs,
As long as there is a plan for someone to maintain it.
And historically, the township maintains, 150 basins or ish?
A lot.
A lot, yeah. And then some HOAs maintain some too. It's all about what the final agreement is and who has the management, but somebody does, to your point.
Any other questions for JJ? If we get a motion, then we can open up for public comment. Okay, I will make the motion that we proudly recommend the adoption of the new stormwater management ordinance to a Board of Supervisors.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. Wow. So we have a motion. Any further comment from the commission? Any public comment? Any comment online? Hearing none, I shall call the question. All those in favor of proudly recommending the adoption of the stormwater management ordinance as described by HRG to the Board of Supervisors indicate your support by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We want better stormwater management here in Lower Makefield, Mr. Grenier.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Falls in your court.
Grenier is also acceptable if you want to
Grenier.
speak French. Teasing you, JJ.
I'll just say chairman.
There you go. Well, I would prefer chair. You don't have to say chairman. That's fine.
All right, I'll get it right one of these times. Don't worry.
There you go. Appreciate all the help, JJ. It's been good.
All right, well,
Appreciate it.
thank you, JJ. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you.
TJ, I believe you wanted to make a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Proudly.
Do we have a second
Yes,
on the
but
motion
do you
to
do
adjourn?
it proudly?
I'll second the motion. Mr. Costello seconds. All right, I will call the
Only if
question
we
on the
get
motion to
the-
adjourn. Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Oh, wait a minute.